I really want to ask because you guys kind of hinted at your growth in the church. Then the involvement process, right, is something I really want to learn about. Because so that's the question I have for you guys is how did you get started to get involved in the church and how did that involvement really shape your life into MCYM and even a little bit after that? So
So I think for me, the first real involvement, maybe officially, might have been through catechism. I think I'd mentioned earlier, like being like in charge of Sunday school or being like at the head of that. So I had prior to that, I had years of experience of being like a Sunday school teacher. So the principals at the time they asked me to participate. So at some point, I transitioned into that. I forgot I did it for a few years. Then my term was up, I guess, so they elected someone else, so they chose someone else. So for me, that was like my involvement, and I think we had choir back then too, right? Yeah, yeah. So for me, that was kind of like the moving into like actively participating, like in the church.
I want to add something to what Chachin said right there. I feel like a lot of people in our church these days feel like involvement requires a position, right? And I guess in my heart that like gives me a lot of heartache because it really becomes almost like a status symbol in which we have to fight for specific positions to feel like we take a matter in this church. And Chachin, you highlighted it best because you at the end of it you were like, I still was able to participate in choir and participate because people asked you to, right? To come in and be involved, right? So I'm hoping our listeners as well as are able to understand that these Chachins and Chachis, that even at a young age, right, they saw that involvement as, being there. We talked about that earlier with, showing up, right? It was more of a worry when you weren't there.
But to add to that, and then to kind of add on to what Tom and Lisa were talking about, we were insulated from what goes on in other parishes, but I feel like when we were participating in like the church activities and the church logistics here, I think maybe our culture here was a little bit different. We kind of we helped each other out, right? Like, okay, fine, you're Sunday school principal, but that doesn't mean you go and organize and do everything. You could ask youth group or MCYM or the younger kids, like you're talking about dances. Yeah, maybe all the kids were in Sunday school and I was in charge, but then you guys are arranging like the dances or something, right? There would be like Easter egg guns. I'm not arranging that. Someone else is doing that, and we're doing it all of because we want to do that. It's the goodness that's in us. Okay, they're doing this, so if they ask me to do this or I can, be involved, it wasn't not necessarily like, okay, yeah, you just go ahead and do it. Like, it's not my issue. So I think, when it comes to being involved, it could be, those kind of circumstances where it's like, yeah, you're looking for a position or they're looking for a position. What's like the consequences of that, right? Whereas I think the consequences here were different just because we all kind of look like how Tom said, we're all looking out for each other. We'll help each other out. Something doesn't, if it works out great, we all are happy for it. If it doesn't, then, we'll all just, move forward, those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think having positions, it can be good and bad, right? Like, because people want to ask you like, who put you in charge? Whether it be the choir. But the thing is, from the beginning, we didn't really care for all that positions, right? We did it because, like Jason said, like the goodness of our heart, because we wanted to kind of give back and kind of see how we can kind of contribute to the church in some way, right? And then and then we would all just kind of come together and help each other too with it. So for me, it was like, I had being initially in the Marthoma Church, I've been part of choir early on. So music has always kind of been my kind of area that I was passionate about. So for me, it was like, all right, how do I bring that passion and kind of, be part of the choir here and kind of, let others experience this beautiful liturgy that we have, right? And then I think it was like early college year. Because we wanted to kind of give back and kind of see how we can kind of contribute to the church in some way, right? And then and then we would all just kind of come together and help each other too with it. So for me, it was like, I had been initially in the Marthoma Church. I've been part of choir early on. So music has always kind of been my kind of area that I was passionate about. So for me, it was like, all right, how do I bring that passion and kind of, be part of the choir here and kind of, you know, let others experience this beautiful liturgy that we have, right? And then I think it was like early college years, but then when we were in our 20s, we used to bring all kinds of instruments because no one really knew, like, we didn't know what it was supposed to sound like. And we had a priest at the time that was kind of open to that. So you imagine having like tambourines and maracas and all kinds of, in a Mulligan mess. It was, you think it back and you're like, how can Achin let us do that? Because it's just thinking back, it just sounds like bizarre and just would have sounded weird today if we were to do that. But I mean, having that freedom and then us all come together to kind of experience or let others experience that beauty. I think that's what it was about. So for me, it was like early on to now, I just love kind of just being part of the choir and kind of help some of our younger generations kind of be able to express themselves through the choir and through music,
I think in the very early stages, it wasn't necessarily that we were asked or we were elected to do anything. We had to do it because there was nobody else to do it too. That was another part of it, that there really wasn't anybody else that could take that up. So it was our responsibility to do those types of things. And I think in a lot of ways, and we stressed out in a lot of ways too, trying to organize it and do these things. But I agree with Lijo, like, because we had the freedom and our Achins were very supportive of us learning and really trying to develop our church community and really understand how to get the kids more engaged, it was actually instrumental to our growth. And I think, a couple of times you're kind of forced to, you have to do it. And then later you become like, you have a sense of obligation, like, this is the right thing to do. This is what I need to do in order for our church to flourish. And so even like, we were in choir for many, many years. It's not that any of us were professional singers, but who else is going to sing and help to lead the liturgy? And so that was always another thing that I appreciated about our church, is you didn't have to be a professional dancer to be on the ecumenical dances. You didn't have to be a professional singer to sing in the choir. You didn't have to be, the best speech person to talk. Yeah, the Lord made you capable to do these things, so you do to the best of your ability, and then you carry along and you try to do that to the fullest. And so I think that was the other thing that I really appreciated about our church community. And I see this in other church communities where people are, they long for the position or they long for the title. I don't necessarily think any of us actually long for the title, but we have that sense of obligation and kind of that accountability to hold one another accountable to those things, but also just being able to do it. And one other thing I want to say is, we didn't start off with it being necessarily faith driven, because a lot of it was we had to do it to make it happen. But as the faith became more and more instrumental, and as we had more exposure to like how the Lord works in our lives, I definitely think the Holy Spirit carried us through so many years of being able to do things and be successful, because it wasn't our own doing or our own abilities. It was well beyond us. And so I do think by the grace of God, we were able to do those things.
I just wanted to add something really quick. It reminds me of the quote, God doesn't call the qualified, but qualifies the called, right?
Yep.
You guys are walking definition of that. God bestowed graces upon you to fulfill the work of his church. That's why we have this beautiful church here. Like, when I first came to Chicago, like, I was just blown. I'm like, kind of got teary because I wish we had something like this in San Jose or something. But hopefully, pray for us. Yeah. I hope more people like this rise up in our area and kind of take on responsibilities, because positions are not end all be all, right? Those are just, of course, for logistic purposes. But yeah, God calls the unqualified and he makes them qualified, right? Because his will is great. So thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, Lisa said it beautifully, but So that had two different trains of thoughts here. So one of the things when we're talking about the position versus non-position, I know growing up we had to all be National Honor Society, so you needed 40 hours. So, so I thought I could, I talked to Archie and I'm like, Archie, I need 40 hours. So he's like, start cleaning. So I mean, it's funny how it started that way. So I had to come here a few different Saturdays, do the cleaning. But then after a while, I realized, hey, this needs to be done. So I remember I asked Jay. Jay came one time, and then I asked a bunch of other different people to come, and we just would do it. And it wasn't like 20, 30 people. It was like 3 or 4 people, and you're doing the cleaning, but then you're really you're adding that connection, right? So I got to know Jay a little bit deeper there. And then so that kind of like, I guess I felt like for me, that kind of started the whole service mentality toward the church. So it's not like, hey, I'm coming to church because I need to get this. No, hey, the church need this. What can I do? Right. So that was one thing right there. And then the other thing was sports, right? So when we first started, like I said, we weren't as deep in the faith, but sports was something that we all wanted to be, and we wanted to kill all the different churches, and for sure, right? But then we would practice, and we got to, even after a full Sunday school, full mass, we would then eat lunch, and then we would go play ball for 2-3 hours, and then to make sure that we did well in the tournament. So I felt like that also got everybody together. The last thing was, so I just was giving the annual report for the church as a trustee, and there was so much arguing related to, we need to do this, we need to do that, this costs this much money, what are we going to do? And like, I was compelled, like, even though I didn't have anything in mind there, but when that came up, it was just like, you don't contribute with just money. You can contribute in different ways. You can say, hey, if the church needs to do something, can I go in there? If there's a church needs some work, maybe a contractor or somebody that can do something, or like, there's different ways to contribute. And I think people are fixated like, well, this person gave $1,000. I don't have $1,000 to do, so that person's better than me. No, the Lord calls us all in different ways. And that's what we need to do. It's just a matter of us being open to it. And when we get that nudge to actually do something about it, as opposed to just letting it sit there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's really touching that when I'm hearing each of y'all talk about your topics, you also just don't talk about the roles and the church as a whole, but you also talk about specific people and the way that your friendships and your relationships also blossomed through this. Right. This whole thing, like our church life, like not just in terms of people, but also like families coming together, like this whole community growing as one. It involves the people around you, right? Actually investing in the people around you, continue to connect with them. So we have a question here.